Sometimes, for one reason or another, there's a book that you read and it's very difficult to review or rate, and that was definitely the real story for me. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about The Real Story, which is the first book in the gap cycle. It's the gap into conflict. And this is a very unique book. This is one that I've heard many people talk about this series, specifically because I'm a big Donaldson fan. I really enjoyed the first two Thomas Covenant trilogies. I really enjoyed Morden's Need, and I've read some of his novellas and some of his other stuff there, and he's an author that I am very interested to get to the whole catalog. This one, which was on my list to get to eventually anyway, was a patron pick, so I ended up picking it up this quarter for that. And it's one that I had been very much forewarned about the content in it, including some graphic content that is here. And yeah, that definitely is present. But more than that, this is just such a different kind of book. And so I'm going to talk about it, both with what sort of the premise is. And there is a quite long afterword from the author kind of explaining some of his different inspirations, how the story took shape, and what he's doing, which I feel like does provide some context, but still at the same time, it almost raises more questions. However, I have heard that this is sort of the starting point. This was him kind of exploring something, but then it turned into a series where it wasn't originally going to be. So this is still something I'm interested to continue, but this is a book that I feel like is going to turn a lot of people off, and for very good reason. And so we will talk about that. So the story here, while mostly focused on one character and their point of view, is following three characters: Angus Thermopylae, Morn Highland, and Nick Sicorso. And it's more so than even just following the characters, it's the idea of three different character kind of archetypes that are super common in storytelling, and playing off of that by having them change which one they are throughout the story. So it's playing off the villain and victim and like hero or rescuer, as Donaldson phrases it. And that's what we're looking at here. So we're presented with a story. At the very beginning, you have Angus, who is in a bar with Morn Highland, and it's presented that he must be the villain, her the victim, and then there's Nick Sicorso, who's also a like space pirate captain, similar to Angus, and he is presented as the rescuer, the one who's going to come in and save the victim, and that's kind of where we start out here. Now, through the course of the story, those roles change, and that is kind of the idea of what's being explored, but we are definitely focusing more so on Angus Thermopylae, who very much shows how much of a villain that he is throughout. And so even with what's being explored, I feel like it could have been done without some of the content that was there. Now, to explain that, without going into too much detail, the other sort of conceit here, which this part reminded me sort of the kind of thing where there's certain like sci-fi speculative fiction thing. It's like, hey, this is a sci-fi and this is the general idea. So this story, like something I've seen that's been done in, especially some like the older sci-fi or like speculative fiction, is it takes it's like, this is a sci-fi world, and then here's the specific thing that's sort of different. And we do that a bit here. And the thing here is there is something called gap sickness, where when you're passing the gap with part of space travel, sometimes it will just sort of make people go temporarily crazy, and they might hurt themselves or others. And so that's a set of things. So that's the gap cycle is playing off of that name. But it also introduces the idea of zone implants. And a zone implant is, there's like backstory that originally it was supposed to be helping to treat some medical conditions, but it's an implant essentially into your brain. And it can be used in these situations to sort of take control of somebody and prevent them from harming themselves or others during if they're experiencing gap sickness. And so it's something that is often used on voyages where it's set up that way. Abuse of a zone implant is immediately punishable by death and is a capital crime because of the clear things that can happen if somebody should abuse its own implant, which essentially just gives you the power over somebody completely. and you, with like a controller, you can control them, make them not be able to move, and essentially, force them to do whatever. And that goes exactly as you would expect. And you see that that's what's setting up with Angus Thermopylae and with Morin Highland, who is a very beautiful woman that he ends up sort of rescuing slash kidnapping during events that happen, and ends up putting his own implants into her, and then taking full advantage of that. And that's kind of what we're looking at. So, looking at this as kind of more from an idea standpoint, you can read a lot into the commentary here. There's something that originally was developed to have a very legitimate medical purpose, and also in addition to that, too, outside of that, it's found to be able to help prevent something that could potentially cause people to do harm to themselves or others, and then it's immediately opens up the area though for abuse. And even though it's this thing that's supposed to never happen, and it's talked about that it's rare because the punishment is so severe and permanent, it still can kind of happen. And so just looking at humanity doing that, you can find I feel like lots of examples of that, where anytime there's some sort of new thing, even if it's meant to be good, people are going to find a way to abuse it, to make it, use it for bad reasons, that sort of thing. That's just sort of the way that human nature tends to be on the macro level, but you're seeing that on a much more personal level with the character. And you're in no way, I don't think, supposed to like the character or really like feel or identify with the characters. This is more so, I feel like, the thought experiment to do that. He also talks about in the afterword that he had a lot of inspiration from a four-part epic from Richard Wagner, which I'm not going to try and pronounce the full name, but The Ring, which is not something that I'm super familiar with. He talks quite a lot of details, and there's some other archetypes that are being explored from there, although it goes into some different directions. But again, so I can see and appreciate what's being done there, but it's still, for me, the level of detail, and it's barring a couple of times it's not super graphic or specific, but it's still, I can appreciate what's being done. I personally did not need that. The level of detail that you get in the story, for me, is just not something I'm a fan of. Now, despite that, and I feel like in most stories from most authors, that probably would have been an immediate, yeah, I'm not going to read this, I'm done. Donaldson has both earned my trust that what he's doing, he has reasons for, and it's not just being done gratuitously based on the other stuff that I've read for him. But also, there is something that was really just oddly compelling about this story as a whole, and that drew me in very quickly. And I think some of it just comes down to Donaldson's a really great author, and the way the story is written, the way the characters are written, exploring all of these desperate people, and the world being interesting, and all the things setting up, I still found myself like not able to put this down. I read this much quicker than I intended to. I just had kind of started and was going to casually give it a try and start it out, and I finished it very quickly. Because I just found it difficult to put down, and that's, I think, comes down to Donaldson's storytelling. This one, though, not for the faint of heart. You really do have to be willing to read something that gets graphic, like I said, in the exact way that you would expect, based on my explanation, and is pretty dark. And I know there's a lot of people who are generally okay with like the dark type of things. This, though, is I really don't feel like any of the characters are latch onable, and Donaldson likes to write challenging characters. And in a lot of Donaldson's work that I've read so far, the characters are challenging to connect with, or to identify with, or to feel for, or however you want to approach it. But what's actually being done is still really, really strong. And that's something that his stuff can be challenging to get into, but are typically rewarding. I have heard that the gap cycle is really big and rewarding, and this seems that it is going to be kind of springboarding a much bigger, like, wide ranging space epic, going from there with politics and money and aliens and all kinds of stuff. This, though, starts as just really exploring the dynamic between these three characters, and again, the idea of the real story, which is I think a big part. That's obviously, that's the title, and it's exploring that idea of things aren't always what they appear, and sometimes you really don't know the real story, and sometimes things at their appearance are not what they are, and that roles can change. So I feel like from a craft perspective, from a storytelling perspective, I can really appreciate what Donaldson is doing here. Although I just, yeah, again, I feel like, and I looked at some reviews to this afterward. I saw so many people that are kind of, I think, in the same boat to me, appreciating some aspects of this and the writing, but just don't feel that it needed everything that it had. And that's me, and where I firmly kind of land on that. And some people, like I said, maybe it'll come in later and kind of explain more, but I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to personally make me think it was entirely necessary, what was included. But that's just going to be my take here. I'm curious. I know there's been a lot of people. Anytime I mention Donaldson, people are like, "Oh, you got to read the Gap cycle." So I'm curious. Let me know your thoughts on how the series progresses, because it does sound like this is really springboarding into. I think the same characters are involved, but very different as we're going. It's not going to be one I'm going to be rushing out to get to, but I am definitely planning to continue and see the series through. But let me know your thoughts on this, or your reaction, or if you had something similar or reacted totally different from what I did to this. I'd be really curious to find out. So definitely let me know. That is it for this one, though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizard in the Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, with you, anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And, of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.